One wrong digit, one dirty text, one man who doesn't take sorry for an answer. Allison is done being ignored by her long-distance boyfriend, David. Alone on the West Coast and fueled by top-shelf tequila, she decides to send a message he'll never forget. A vivid play-by-play of exactly what she's wearing and what she wants him to do to her. She hits send, expecting a frantic call from David. Instead, she gets a reply from a stranger 3,000 miles away. "Keep going, I'm listening." Enter Do-yoon, the cold-blooded, mid-30s corporate kingpin of a Korean Mafia syndicate on the East Coast. He's a man who thrives on control, and Allison's accidental intrusion into his private life is a spark he didn't know he needed. He doesn't just want her photos, he wants her submission. When Allison realizes her mistake, she tries to run, but Do-yoon has already tracked her down. Now, the Mafia boss is crossing the country to claim the woman who dared to tempt him, and David is the least of her worries. In the world of the Korean syndicate, once you catch the boss's eye, there is no such thing as a wrong number. The West Coast sunset was a bleed of violet and orange, but Allison barely noticed it through the condensation on her third margarita. She sat on her balcony in Santa Monica, feeling the familiar sting of neglect. David had blown her off, again. "Work is crazy, Al," he'd said, a phrase that was becoming the soundtrack to her mid-20s. Allison looked at herself in the reflection of her sliding glass door. With her round, doll-like eyes and full, pouty lips, she knew she looked incredible in the silk slip dress she'd bought specifically for a date that wasn't happening. Her curves were accentuated by the soft fabric, and the frustration of being ignored was starting to feel like a physical itch. "If he won't appreciate this," she muttered, her vision slightly blurred by the tequila, "maybe a reminder will help." She grabbed her phone. Her fingers felt heavy and clumsy as she navigated to her messages. She began typing, the words flowing with a boldness she only possessed when she was 3 drinks deep. She described exactly what she wanted to do to him, how she wanted to be held, and the things she was currently doing to herself while thinking of him. With a shaky breath, she stood up, snapped a photo that captured the swell of her chest and the curve of her waist, and attached it to the thread. "See what you're missing," she whispered to the empty room. She hit send. She didn't notice that the contact name at the top of the screen wasn't David. It was a string of numbers she didn't recognize, a typo born of a single digit entered incorrectly months ago. She tossed the phone onto the bed and headed to the kitchen for one more drink, feeling a sense of triumph. She had no idea that 3,000 miles away, in a penthouse overlooking the Atlantic, a very different kind of man was watching his phone light up. Do-yoon sat in the back of a black sedan, the neon lights of the New Jersey skyline reflecting off his sharp jawline. At 35, he was the face of the syndicate's legitimate side, a corporate titan who ran the most exclusive hotels on the East Coast. But beneath the charcoal gray suit was a man who had built an empire on blood and absolute control. His personal phone, a device known to only a handful of people, buzzed on the leather seat beside him. He picked it up, expecting a security update or a logistical report from the docks. Instead, his dark eyes narrowed as a series of notifications flooded the screen. "I'm tired of waiting for you. I want to feel you against me." Then came the image. Do-yoon's breath hitched almost imperceptibly. He was used to beauty, but the woman on his screen was breathtaking. She had a soft, lush look, round eyes full of a fire that even the camera couldn't dull, and a body that seemed designed to be worshipped. She was thousands of miles away, judging by the time stamp and the glimpses of Pacific light in the background. He should have blocked the number. He should have handed the phone to his tech team to trace the breach. But as he scrolled through her descriptions of what she wanted, intimate, vivid, and raw, a slow, predatory smile spread across his face. She thought she was talking to a boyfriend. She had no idea she had just invited a wolf into her digital life. Do-yoon loosened his tie, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. He didn't correct her. Instead, he typed back two words that would change Allison's life forever. Show me. The California sun was far too bright. Allison groaned, pulling the duvet over her head as her brain pulsed with a rhythmic, tequila-induced throb. Memory fragments of the previous night began to drift back. The margaritas, the loneliness, the phone. Oh God, the phone. She fumbled for her device on the nightstand, squinting against the blue light. She opened her messages, expecting to see a string of confused or excited texts from David. Her heart didn't just drop, it stopped. The contact wasn't David. It was a 212 area code, New York, and the conversation was a one-sided massacre of her dignity. There were her photos, her unfiltered desires, and her deepest secrets laid bare to a complete stranger. And then there was the reply. Show me, sent at 11:45 p.m. Is that all you have to say, little bird? Sent at 1:30 a.m. Allison bolted upright, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her round eyes were wide with a mix of horror and a strange, involuntary jolt of electricity. Who the hell is this? She whispered. She began to type a frantic apology. I am so sorry. Wrong number, please delete everything. I was drunk, please. The bubbles appeared instantly. The stranger was active. I don't delete high-quality assets, Allison, the reply came. Her blood turned to ice. She hadn't used her name in the texts. How did he know who she was? In his sleek Manhattan office, Du-Yoon watched the typing. Bubbles dance on his screen. He had spent the morning running her number through his private database. Allison Vance, 25, freelance designer, living in a beachside apartment in Santa Monica. Boyfriend, David Miller, unimpressive mid-level marketing manager with a penchant for neglecting what he owns. Du-Yoon swiveled his chair toward the floor-to-ceiling window. He held a glass of dark espresso, his mind calculating. He should have been focusing on the merger of his hotel chain, a front for his family's offshore accounts, but the image of Allison's lush lips and defiant gaze was burned into his retinas. He sent a new message. David doesn't deserve the things you sent me, but I think I might. Allison's reply was fast. You're a creep, I'm blocking you. Du-Yoon let out a low, dark chuckle. He typed back, go ahead, but I've already backed up the gallery, Allison, and I'm currently looking at your front door through a street cam feed. You look lovely in that oversized t-shirt, by the way. A minute passed, then two. He knew she was frozen in fear on the other side of the country. He wasn't a creep. He was a predator who had found a new obsession. He wanted to see those round eyes fill with realization. He wanted to see if she tasted as sweet as she looked in silk. His phone buzzed. What do you want? Du-Yoon smirked, his thumb tracing the line of his jaw. I want you to keep your phone charged. I'm going to call you tonight. If you don't answer, I'll have to send one of my associates in LA to check on you in person. The rest of Allison's day was a blur of paranoia. She kept the blinds drawn in her Santa Monica apartment, peering through the slats at every black car that drove by. Her mind raced. How did he know her name? How did he know what she was wearing? She tried to call David, but it went to voicemail. Hey, it's David, leave a message. His cheerful, oblivious tone made her want to scream. He was at a corporate retreat in Ajay, probably playing golf while her life was being dismantled by a ghost from New York. She sat on her sofa, clutching a kitchen knife she knew she'd never have the courage to use. As the sun dipped below the horizon, her phone began to vibrate. The caller ID was unknown. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She answered on the third ring, her voice a mere whisper. Hello. You sound breathless, Allison. A deep, melodic voice echoed in her ear. It was smooth, like expensive bourbon, but carried an edge of cold steel. Is it fear, or are you still thinking about the things you wrote to me? Who are you? She demanded, trying to find her backbone. Is this some kind of blackmail, if you want money? I have more money than your entire bloodline could spend in 10 lifetimes, the man interrupted. My name is Du Yoon, and I don't want your money. I want your time. Du Yoon, she repeated, the name feeling heavy on her tongue. You're in New York, I'm in California. Just delete the photos and leave me alone, please. Distance is an illusion for a man like me, Du Yoon replied. She could hear the clink of ice against glass on his end. You sent those messages because you're lonely, because your boyfriend treats you like a piece of furniture he's forgotten he bought. I'm giving you my undivided attention, Allison. Most people would kill for that. I didn't ask for it. And yet you've stayed on the line for 2 minutes, he countered. Tell me, Allison, when was the last time David made you feel truly seen, truly wanted? Allison bit her lip, her eyes stinging with tears. The intimacy of his voice was terrifyingly seductive. He was a stranger, a criminal by the sound of it, yet he was reaching through the phone and touching the exact bruise David had left on her heart. Go to your front door, Du Yoon commanded. What? No. Go to the door, Allison. There is a delivery. Think of it as a peace offering. With trembling hands, Allison walked to her door. She looked through the peephole. A man in a sharp black suit was walking away, leaving a large, gold-embossed box on her welcome mat. She opened the door just wide enough to snag the box and pulled it inside. Her hands shook as she untied the silk ribbon. Inside was a dress, deep emerald green, made of heavy, expensive silk, and a velvet box containing a diamond choker that sparkled like ice. Put it on, Du Yoon's voice came through the speaker. I'm not putting this on for you. Then I'll have to send my driver back to help you dress, he said, his tone dropping an octave. And I don't think you'd like his touch as much as mine. Put on the dress, Allison. Send me a photo. If you do, I'll tell my men in LA to stand down for the night. She realized then that this wasn't just a wrong number. It was a trap. But as she touched the soft silk of the dress, a traitorous part of her wondered what it would feel like to be claimed by a man who didn't take no for an answer. Allison stood in front of her full-length mirror, the emerald silk clinging to every curve. The dress was a masterpiece of design, plunging low at the chest to highlight her assets and hugging her hips before falling to the floor. The diamond choker felt like a cold, heavy collar around her neck. She looked beautiful. More than beautiful, she looked like a queen. She took the photo. Her face was flushed, her round lips parted in a mix of defiance and arousal she couldn't quite hide. She sent it. The reply was instant. Beautiful, but you're missing something. What? She whispered into the phone. The look of a woman who knows she belongs to someone, Du Yoon said. David is a boy playing at love. I am a man who understands possession. Sleep in the dress, Allison. I want you to feel me against your skin all night. You're crazy, she breathed. I'm focused, he corrected. I'll see you soon. The line went dead. 3,000 miles away, Du Yoon stared at the photo of Allison in the emerald dress. He sat in his mahogany row office at the Grand Syndicate Hotel. His second-in-command, Yi-ho, stood by the door. The flight is prepped, boss, Yi-ho said, but the triads are moving on the docks in Jersey. Is this the right time to go to the West Coast? Du Yoon didn't look up from the image of the woman with the soft eyes and the big heart. The docks can be handled with fire and lead, Yi-ho, but a woman like this, she requires a personal touch. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. He was a corporate mafia boss. He ran the hotels, the money laundering, the high-stakes gambling. But at his core, he was a hunter, and he had just found the rarest prey of all. Clear my schedule for the next 48 hours, Du Yoon ordered. I'm going to Los Angeles to collect a debt. The next afternoon, Allison was trying to pack a bag. She had decided to drive to her mother's house in San Diego. She couldn't stay here. The walls felt like they were closing in. She was folding a pair of jeans when her doorbell rang. David, she called out. Hopping her boyfriend had come home early to surprise her. She opened the door, a smile halfway formed on her lips, but it wasn't David. Standing in her hallway was a man who looked like he had stepped out of a dark, expensive dream. He was tall, with raven black hair swept back from a sharp, aristocratic forehead. His eyes were like obsidian, scanning her with an intensity that made her knees weak. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her car. "You're late, Allison," he said, his voice the same bourbon-smooth tone from the phone. "I told you I'd see you soon." Allison backed away, her heart leaping into her throat. "Do Yoon." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft, final click. He loomed over her, the scent of sandalwood and power filling her senses. "In the flesh," he whispered, his hand reaching out to tilt her chin up. "And you are even more exquisite when you're trembling." The air in the small apartment turned heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the fine hairs on Allison's arms stand up. Do-yoon didn't move like a normal man. He moved with the silent, liquid grace of an apex predator. He surveyed her living room, his gaze landing on a framed photo of her and David at the beach. With a flick of his finger, he knocked the frame over. The glass didn't shatter, but the sound made Allison jump. "You don't belong in a place this small," Do-yoon said, his voice dropping to a low vibrate. He turned back to her, his dark eyes tracing the curve of her round lips. "And you certainly don't belong to a man who leaves you alone to drink yourself into a state of undress." "You shouldn't be here," Allison stammered, backing into the kitchen counter. "This is breaking and entering. I'll call the police." Do-yoon stepped into her personal space, his hand resting on the counter on either side of her, pinning her in place. He was inches away, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his chest. "I own the precinct, Allison. I own the hotels you walk past, and after last night's messages, I'm beginning to think I own you too." Allison's breath came in ragged gasps. Up close, Do-yoon was devastating. His skin was flawless, his features carved from stone, but it was the raw, unadulterated hunger in his eyes that terrified and secretly thrilled her. "I made a mistake," she whispered, her chest heaving, the swell of her breasts nearly brushing his expensive silk tie. "It was a typo, one number." "A beautiful mistake," Do-yoon murmured. He reached out, his thumb grazing her lower lip, pulling it down slightly. "Most people spend their lives trying to hide their truest desires. You sent yours to me on a silver platter. You told me how you wanted to be touched, how you wanted to be taken." He leaned in, his lips hovering just an inch from her ear. "I'm a businessman, Allison. I don't believe in refunds. You offered. I accepted." Before she could respond, the sound of a key turned in the front door. "Al, you home? The retreat ended early," David's voice called out from the hallway. Allison's heart plummeted. David was home. Do-yoon didn't flinch. He didn't move away. He simply straightened his suit jacket, a cold, amused smirk playing on his lips. David walked into the kitchen, dropping his gym bag on the floor. He stopped dead when he saw the tall, imposing Korean man standing inches away from his girlfriend. David was athletic, but compared to Do-yoon's lethal aura, he looked like a schoolboy. "Who the hell are you?" David demanded, his face flushing red. "Allison, what is this?" "David, I can explain," Allison started, her voice trembling. "She doesn't have to explain anything to a man who neglects his treasures," Do-yoon interrupted, his voice cool and dismissive. He turned to David, his eyes turning into shards of ice. "My name is Do-yoon. I am the man who has been looking after your girlfriend while you were away playing games." David lunged forward, his ego bruised and his temper flaring. "Get out of my house." He reached for Do-yoon's shoulder, but in a blur of motion, Do-yoon caught David's wrist. There was a sickening pop and a gasp of pain as Do-yoon twisted it with effortless strength, forcing David to his knees. "David!" Allison screamed, reaching out, but Do-yoon's free hand caught her waist, pulling her flush against his side. The contrast was jarring, the violence he dealt to David and the firm, possessive hold he had on her. "Listen closely, David," Du-yoon said, looking down at the younger man with pure disdain. You have been fired from your position as her partner. You are weak. You are boring. And you didn't even notice when she was screaming for attention. Du-yoon looked at Allison, his grip on her hip tightening, his fingers digging into her soft skin. Tell him, Allison. Tell him who you sent those photos to last night. Allison looked at David, his face twisted in pain and confusion, and then up at Du-yoon. The power Du-yoon radiated was intoxicating. For the first time in years, she felt like she was the center of a storm. I sent them to him, David, she whispered, the lie tasting like fire. I sent them to him because I wanted a real man. The silence that followed was deafening. Du-yoon released David, who slumped against the floor, cradling his wrist and staring at Allison with utter betrayal. Get out, David choked out. Both of you get out. Du-yoon didn't need to be told twice. He turned to Allison, his hand sliding down to interlace his fingers with hers. His palm was calloused and warm. You have 5 minutes to pack a bag, Du-yoon commanded. My jet is waiting at Lax. You're coming to New York. I can't just leave, Allison protested, even as her feet began to move toward the bedroom. You can and you will, Du-yoon said, following her into the room. He watched as she threw a few essentials into a suitcase. He walked over to her closet, pulling out the emerald silk dress he had sent her. And bring this. I want to see it on the floor of my bedroom tonight. As they walked out of the apartment, leaving a broken David behind, Allison felt a rush of adrenaline. She was leaving her safe, boring life for a world of shadows and silk. She was now the property of a corporate mafia boss, and as Du-yoon handed her into the back of the black sedan, she realized the part of her story was only just beginning. The interior of the private jet was a sanctuary of cream leather and polished mahogany. Allison sat in a wide, plush captain's chair, her heart still racing a mile a minute. The transition from her sun-drenched apartment to this hyper-luxurious cabin felt like a fever dream. Across from her, Du-yoon sat with a laptop open, his fingers flying across the keys as if he hadn't just dismantled a man's life 10 minutes ago. The jet hummed as it climbed toward 30,000 feet. Allison looked out the window at the receding lights of Los Angeles. You're very quiet, little bird, Du-yoon said without looking up. I just ruined my life, Allison whispered, her round eyes reflecting the dim cabin lights. I have no job, no boyfriend, and I'm on a plane with a man who uses his hands to break people. Du-yoon closed his laptop and leaned forward. The movement was predatory. You didn't ruin your life. You ended a rehearsal. Now the real performance begins. He reached across the aisle, his fingers tracing the line of her throat. And as for my hands, they are capable of much more than breaking. A flight attendant appeared, silently placing a bottle of vintage champagne and 2 crystal flutes on the table between them. She disappeared behind a curtain before Allison could even blink. Du-yoon poured the golden liquid, the bubbles hissing in the quiet cabin. He handed a glass to Allison. Drink, you're shaking. She took a sip, the cold, expensive wine coating her tongue. Why me? You could have any woman in New York. Why fly across the country for a girl who sent a text to the wrong person? Du-yoon stood up and walked to her chair. He didn't sit, he hovered over her, forcing her to look up at him. Because you were honest. In my world, everyone wears a mask, but those texts, they were raw. You have a hunger in you, Allison, a need to be consumed, and I happen to be starving. He took the glass from her trembling hand and set it down. Then, his hand slid into her hair, tilting her head back. His gaze dropped to her round lips. I've been thinking about this since the first photo hit my screen. He didn't ask. He simply took. Du-yoon leaned down and captured her lips in a kiss that tasted of champagne and dominance. It wasn't the tentative, apologetic kissing she was used to with David. This was an invasion. His tongue searched hers, demanding a response she was all too willing to give. Allison moaned softly, her hands instinctively reaching up to clutch his silk lapels. The power he radiated was a drug. He pulled her out of the seat and into his arms, his large hands sliding down to the small of her back, pressing her chest firmly against his. "You're so soft," he growled against her skin, his lips moving to the sensitive spot beneath her ear. "So lush." He lifted her easily, setting her onto the edge of the mahogany table. Allison's legs wrapped around his waist by instinct. The friction of his expensive wool suit against her bare thighs sent a jolt of lightning through her. He began to unbutton his vest, his eyes never leaving hers. "In this plane and in my hotels," he whispered, his voice dark and honeyed, "there are no rules, only what I want. And right now, I want to see if you're as responsive as your messages promised." The cabin was dimmed, the only light coming from the floor-level LEDs. Du-Yoon's hands were everywhere, mapping her curves, testing the suppleness of her skin. He pulled the collar of her shirt down, his teeth grazing her shoulder, leaving a mark that would surely bruise. "You're mine now," he murmured, his breath hot against her neck. "Every inch, every breath." Allison felt a wave of heat wash over her that had nothing to do with the jet's climate control. She felt seen, not just as a pretty face, but as a woman with deep, untapped desires. As his hand slid higher up her thigh, she arched her back, her fingers tangling in his dark hair. The intimacy was overwhelming. It wasn't just physical, it was the way he looked at her, as if she were the only thing in the world that mattered. For a corporate mafia boss, he was surprisingly attuned to her every shiver, her every gasp. He was a master of his craft, and Allison was his newest, most precious project. By the time the jet began its descent into Teterboro Airport, the atmosphere in the cabin had shifted. The raw, frantic energy of their encounter had settled into a simmering, possessive tension. Allison sat reclined in her chair, her hair slightly mussed, wearing one of Du-Yoon's oversized white dress shirts over her skin. Du-Yoon was back in his seat, perfectly composed, buttoning his cuffs as if he hadn't just spent the last hour worshipping her body. "We're landing," he said, checking his watch. "A car will take us to the Grand Syndicate Hotel. You'll have the penthouse suite. My staff will provide everything you need." "And what happens to me?" Allison asked, her voice finally finding its strength. "Am I a prisoner?" Du-Yoon looked at her, a faint, dangerous smile touching his lips. He walked over and knelt between her legs, placing his hands on her knees. "A prisoner? No, you're a guest of the boss," he said. "But let's be clear, Allison, you walked into my world. There is no going back to Santa Monica. From tonight on, your world starts and ends with me." As the wheels touched the tarmac, Allison realized the girl who sent that drunk text was officially gone. In her place was a woman about to enter the heart of a criminal empire. The Grand Syndicate Hotel was a monolith of glass and black steel towering over the Manhattan skyline. As the sedan pulled into a private underground garage, Allison felt the sheer weight of Du-Yoon's world. Guards in earpieces stood at every entrance, bowing their heads as Du-Yoon stepped out. He didn't wait for them. He reached back into the car and took Allison's hand, his grip firm and proprietary. They bypassed the lobby, taking a gold-lined express elevator straight to the 80th floor. When the doors opened, Allison gasped. The penthouse was an open-concept masterpiece with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a 360-degree view of the city's glittering lights. "This is your home now," Du-Yoon said, shedding his coat. "It's a fortress," she whispered, walking to the glass. The taxis below looked like tiny yellow ants. "It has to be," he replied, coming up behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his solid frame. "My enemies look for weakness, Allison. They look for things I care about. From the moment you stepped off that plane, you became the most vulnerable part of my empire, and the most protected." The honeymoon phase of the arrival was short-lived. The next morning, Allison woke up alone in a bed that could fit 5 people. She found a new wardrobe waiting for her, vibrant silks, tailored blazers, and lace lingerie that left nothing to the imagination. As she explored the penthouse, she heard raised voices from the office wing. She crept toward the door, her heart hammering. "The triads are hitting the Midtown construction site, boss," a voice, likely Yeeho's, growled. "They know you're distracted by the girl. They think you've gone soft." There was a chilling silence, then the sound of a glass shattering. "Soft." Duyun's voice was a low, lethal hum. "Burn the site. Then find their supplier and bring him to the basement of the hotel. I'll show them exactly how distracted I am." Allison pulled back, her blood running cold. This wasn't the seductive man from the jet. This was the Mafia boss, the man who ruled with fire. She realized then that her wrong number hadn't just landed her a lover, it had dropped her into the center of a war. Late that night, Duyun returned. He smelled of cold air and expensive tobacco. His knuckles were bruised, and his eyes were dark with the adrenaline of the hunt. When he saw Allison standing in the living room wearing a sheer black nightgown, his expression shifted from cold violence to searing heat. "I heard you today," she said bravely, "about the fire." He walked toward her, discarding his tie on the floor. "Then you know what kind of man I am. Does it frighten you?" "Yes," she admitted, her round eyes locking onto his. "But it makes me wonder why a man who can destroy anything chooses to be so gentle with me." Duyun grabbed her waist, lifting her onto the high marble kitchen island. He parted her legs, stepping between them. "Because you are the only thing in this city that isn't a lie," he growled. He leaned down, his mouth devouring hers with a desperate, raw hunger. His hands moved with a feverish intensity, stripping away the lace. He worshipped her curves, his lips marking her skin as if he were branding his territory. In the heat of their passion, the danger of the outside world faded. There was only the friction of skin, the sound of labored breath, and the realization that Allison was no longer just a guest, she was his anchor. The peace was shattered 2 days later. David had tracked her down. Using the last of his savings, he had flown to New York, showing up at the hotel lobby demanding to see her. Duyun had him brought to the penthouse, but not for a reunion. He wanted Allison to choose. David stood in the center of the lavish room, looking small and haggard. "Allison, please. This guy is a criminal. He's dangerous. I'm sorry I ignored you. I'll be better. Just come home." Allison looked at David, the man who represented safety and boredom. Then she looked at Duyun, who stood by the window, a silent statue of power. Duyun didn't say a word. He simply watched her, giving her the one thing David never did, the power to decide her own fate. "David," Allison said, her voice steady, "you didn't just ignore me. You didn't see me. Duyun saw me through a single text message better than you did in 3 years." She looked at the diamond choker on her neck. "I'm not coming back. I belong here." After David was escorted out, safely at Allison's request, the penthouse returned to its quiet, heavy luxury. Duyun approached her, his hand resting on the nape of her neck. "You chose well," he whispered. "I didn't choose the Mafia, Duyun," she said, turning in his arms. "I chose you, but if I'm staying, I'm not just going to be a doll in a glass box. I want to know the business. I want to be by your side." Duyun felt a surge of pride. The woman with the round eyes had developed a sharp edge. He leaned down, kissing her forehead. "The hotel business is complex, Allison, and the other business is even darker. But together, we'll own this entire coast." She smiled, leaning her head against his chest. What started as a drunken mistake, a typo sent into the digital void, had ended in a throne. Allison was no longer the girl crying over a neglected text. She was the woman who had tamed a beast, and as they looked out over New York City, she knew the real story was only just beginning. Allison finally found a man who sees her, but at what cost? She went from a neglected girlfriend to the queen of a criminal empire in the blink of an eye. What do you think? Was Allison justified in leaving David the way she did, or was she out of line for upgrading to a dangerous stranger? Did David deserve to be replaced, Or was he just a normal guy who made a mistake? Drop a comment below and let me know. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button.